We are taking you live to Canberra now. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, is going to be commenting on those GDP figures and also the hot button issue of superannuation. Let's listen in.
Okay, so let me get settled. Okay, here to talk about the national accounts and the monthly inflation gauge, and I figure you may have questions on other issues. Today's national accounts show that growth in the Australian economy is moderating as expected. This is the inevitable consequence of global challenges, high inflation and rising interest rates. These numbers tell the story of 2022. And we know that 2023 will be a different story. The global economy is even more unpredictable. The war in Ukraine is entrenched and interest rates are biting harder and harder on our people. We knew that growth would begin to moderate around now, and it is. We knew that 2023 would be a challenging year for the economy, and we still expect that to be the case. But despite all of these challenges, the Australian economy still grew by 0.5% in the December quarter of last year and by 2.7% through 2022. This is faster growth than all of the major advanced economies, and it's more than twice the growth of the OECD average. I think it's an unfortunate sign of the times that even in one of the best economies in the world here in Australia, our people are still under extreme pressure. It's a sign of the times that even in one of the world's best economies, our people are still struggling under the weight of a global downturn, high inflation and rising interest rates as well. We've got a lot coming at us from around the world, as I've said to you before, but we've got a lot going for us as well. But the major story of these national accounts being released today is really about the cost of living pressures and the impact of rising interest rates on Australian households in particular. Inflation is still the defining challenge in our economy, and it is still the primary focus of the Albanese government's economic plan. There is lots of evidence of the impact of rising interest rates on Australians around the country in these new numbers today. Consumption growth softened to 0.3% in the quarter to be 5.4% higher over the year. Households have continued to pull back on discretionary goods spending in favour of services as Australians look to get out and travel more around the country. With the sustained pressure on family budgets, we are seeing households saving less out of their income. The saving ratio has declined sharply to 4.5%. More of people's income is being directed to servicing their mortgages. Interest payments are up 23% in the December quarter. There are some good indications in here that more homes are being built as some of the supply constraints in the economy ease, and with a solid pipeline of work over the months ahead, there are reasons to be relatively positive about the outlook for construction of homes. As I said, inflation remains the number one challenge for the economy, and while inflation is higher than we'd like, we are cautiously hopeful that it has peaked, and this is also the review of the Reserve Bank. The National Accounts measure of consumer prices rose by 1.5% in the December quarter and 6.9% over the year. But we also got the monthly inflation read for January today as well. There's a lot of volatility in the monthly inflation read. We need to be cautious and careful about interpreting the monthly outcome. But what it shows is that inflation in January was around 7.4% compared to 8.4% in the monthly read for December of last year. So this is more evidence that inflation is likely to have peaked in our economy, and the worst when it comes to inflation is behind us. Obviously, inflation will be higher than we'd like for longer than we'd like, but this is an encouraging sign in this monthly inflation number that inflation is likely to have peaked at the end of last year. We do have a number of important things going for us in the economy more broadly. The unemployment rate is still near historic lows, still got a 3 in front of it. That's important. We have seen indications more broadly of the beginnings of decent wages growth in our economy, even though the hourly measure in these national accounts is a bit more modest. We are really pleased to see our tourism and education exports are continuing to bounce back from the pandemic, returning international students and tourists supporting a 9.8% lift in service exports in the quarter, and that's really important as a driver of growth in our economy. And we're getting really good prices for our commodity exports as well, with the terms of trade up by 7.2% over the year. And despite our sustained and growing challenges in our economy, as I said before, our economy is performing substantially better than other comparable countries. Our economy grew faster than all of the G7 at 2.7% and more than double the OECD average of growth of 1.1%. And so we are, even with all of our challenges, outperforming the world when it comes to economic growth. Now, we've been upfront about the challenges facing our economy from high inflation and rising interest rates and the global economic slowdown. But we are confident and optimistic about the future of our economy. We do have precisely the right economic plan for these conditions. Our economic plan is custom made for the conditions that we confront in our own economy and in the global economy. The best combination of cost of living relief, repairing our supply chains and showing restraint in the budget. We're focused on addressing inflation with that cost of living relief, with our efforts to fix broken supply chains, and by trying to make the budget more responsible, we can make the economy more resilient at the same time. Now, this was the story of 2022 in the national accounts figures before you this morning, today. The national accounts figures released this morning show the story of 2022. The unfolding story of 2023 will be a story of some substantial economic challenges. We can't pretend them away. Interest rates are biting. Higher inflation has been biting in our economy, and we're not immune from global conditions either. I'm confident that we can get through this. I'm confident that the worst of inflation is behind us rather than ahead of us, but we don't pretend away the substantial challenges in our economy represented in today's national accounts.